Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder.
And if you are returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we do around here is we review stuff. We review usually movies, sometimes TV shows. We go with something newer or more contemporary, paired with something more classic or older. And then, one or both of us will have something solo to review that we've talked about during the week. And I just realized that DB is away house sitting, so I have to do all the stuff.
Oh, darn. Sorry, man.
Yeah.
That's why I'm back to being Kubla Kraus.
Yes.
You can figure out how long it's been since I house sat from when Jack Frost was my solo review.
Yeah. Let me just get those up here real quick.
Well, while he does that, do I actually have anything to comment on? You know what? Let's do a quick little something we haven't done for a while, just for funsies. I'm curious, how bad is Captain America: Brave New World bombing?
Oh yes, it's bombing very badly, as I recall.
Yeah. So I saw it last weekend. It was my solo thing of the week. Go watch my review if you want to see it. Yet another person kind of tear into it's a really mediocre movie.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Its cum last weekend was about 14 million on its third weekend.
Oh.
Remember back in the day when that was like what a Marvel movie could pull in a day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, that's kind of what it did its opening weekend, but still.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. But yeah. So our first review of the week is The Deer King.
The Deer King.
Yes, not to be confused with The Deer Hunter,
or for that matter, the indie video game The Deer God.
Yes.
So this is one that came to Netflix recently. I have actually owned a copy of it for a bit because back before Best Buy stopped carrying Blu-rays, I would just periodically go, oh, well, I have X dollars worth of credit stored up. Let's go peruse the anime DVDs for anything interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fairly recent production, which is why it's qualifying as our new movie of the week. The anime came out in 2022, and it's based on a novel series.
Yes, and I'm unfamiliar with the novel series. I'm assuming it's like a YA fantasy.
I don't know if it's necessarily YA, but it's a Japanese fantasy novel.
Okay.
Came out as 2 volumes.
All right.
There's a manga version that I haven't seen it on sale anywhere, so it may not have gotten a localization. Now, what's interesting about this one, well, actually, there are many interesting things about this one, but Daniel, I think you mentioned having this sort of weird deja vu with the art style too, but you couldn't quite place it.
Yeah, I went and looked it up, and the studio that did this movie also did Kaiju number 8. So that was where I was kind of like looking, because I was really looking at some of the character designs. I'm like, that looks really familiar, and then I went and looked it up and went, yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is just a higher quality animation than that show had.
Yeah.
Also, so the director is a gentleman named Masashi Ando, who is a veteran animator. He worked for Studio Ghibli from 1990 to 2001, which means that he was the animation director and character designer for 3 of the 4 anime films in the top 5 box office revenues for Japan of all time: Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and Your Name.
Wow.
So that is that, that is an excellent pedigree. That this is
Yes, it is. Yeah.
so main directing title.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, and it's I will say I guess I can talk a little bit about the animation since with the I mean the animation's really good. I mean it's you know from a technical standpoint, yeah, it's very well done.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think if there's anything that I even have to really criticize it for. Um,
Yeah.
no, yeah, like you said, just the animation is very nice.
Yeah.
It's mostly very fluid. You aren't really too confused about what's going on unless you're supposed to be confused about what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. There are parts of the story that are like a little like, what am I supposed? What's you're a bit like Towley in South Park. I have no idea what's going on.
You want to get high?
uh, yeah.
But yeah,
Well, I guess we can get into the story. Um,
yeah. So this is actually I did have one thought on the animation.
oh, okay.
Uh, so what I will say is that the guy is very good at what he does. I kept kind of thinking that I was seeing like visual similarities to previous movies he'd worked on, but I didn't necessarily see like there's like a certain je ne sais quoi that I wasn't sure was there for a lot of it. You know what I mean? It's like everything was
Yeah.
competently framed. You could tell what was going on, but like there wasn't a whole lot that really just like hit home. You know, it's like nothing went whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'll just give a shout out to the now Oscar-winning movie we reviewed last week, Flow. Uh, there were a lot of shots in that one that are still with me 2 weeks later. Where this one, yeah, I watched it on Saturday, and it's like, like I remember what happened. I remember the characters, but there aren't like a lot of there aren't a lot of what do you call it? Money shots,
That
I guess.
yeah, yeah. There aren't a lot of like, oh wow, that was incredible. Yeah, kind of moments. Yeah.
Yeah, like it operates at a solid A for technicality, a B for composition and whiz bang.
Yeah.
You can definitely see the same sort of visual elements as his from some of the previous movies he's worked on.
Yeah.
I I almost wondered if this was a Ghibli film before I even knew about it because of the way that he was drawing some of the liquid effects. Like Studio Ghibli and liquid effects are like I don't know rice and soy sauce.
Yeah. They like their liquid effects. Yeah, I remember that from Boy and the Heron. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah. But yeah, let's get so animation wise, unimpeachable, just not amazing.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, to get into the story, it's it takes place in this fantasy realm where you have these two different kingdoms, and the names of the kingdoms are escaping me at the moment.
Uh,
Um,
to the internet.
yes,
Uh, now, what I will say is that the two kingdoms are, in my mind at least, are very clearly supposed to be loosely patterned on like the big kingdom is medieval China, and then the small kingdom is like Inner Mongolia or like one of those steppe peoples, like border peoples.
yeah,
Let's see here. Okay, so the China analogy is the Empire of Zol, and the smaller kingdom was Aquifa, not Aquafina. Important difference. But
yeah.
although, not gonna lie, I didn't listen to the English dub for this one. If I'd been in charge of direct casting for that, I would have had like Aquafina come to do a line just as a joke of one of
Yeah,
the characters from Aquifa, but I'm demented like that.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't watch the English version either. I watched the Japanese with the subtitles.
Yeah, and I think that is a good choice in this case.
Yeah,
Because okay, this is just my personal experience with this type of deliberate anime movie. We'll talk about
yeah,
the pace in a second, but um, the even though I don't speak the language, that Japanese voice track is part of the aesthetic that makes it feel different than a usual movie, and that does tend to add a little bit of interest to it. Plus,
yeah,
since a lot of scenes in this are a little deliberately paced, it does give your eyes something to do.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and, but yeah, so we got these two kingdoms, Zol and Aquifa, and the Aquifa kingdom has basically kind of ceded control to the Zol Empire, and as a result, they've enslaved a lot of the Aquifa people, and we start off in this salt mine, and
Which, boy, is that an awful job.
yeah, yeah. Um, and we meet our uh, hero of our story, Van, who's enslaved in this salt mine. But then during the when he's been put in the box because he stood up to one of the guards, and during the midst of this, the salt mine is attacked by these werewolves, kind of black wolves, who have this like kind of mystical quality to them.
Yeah, they've got this weird liquid purple aura, which what it actually is. This movie has an interesting relationship with magic versus realism
Mhm.
because like the underlying one the big underlying mystery of this is what the black dogs are carriers of this plague, the black wolf fever.
Yeah,
And by the way, if you're squeamish, do not watch this movie because there's a lot of dog bite wounds. There's a lot of uh, leakage from said dog bite wounds at,
yeah,
as the fever takes effect on people. And the weird phenomena is that the natives of Aquafa seem to be immune to the fever, while the Zol occupiers are always taken down by it. And the presence of this fever is actually part of what kept a small sliver of Aquafa free-ish, and it also is probably what kept them from being completely wiped out and brought the empire to the bargaining table.
you're right. Yeah, um, and of course things get even take an even stranger turn when the little girl that you see there, she gets bitten by one of the wolves and is about to be taken away, but then Van stops the wolf, and but even as Van gets bit, they discover that he's immune to the wolf bite, and he suddenly starts getting these like nature powered type powers, basically.
Right, he can basically he can interact with nature. It's kind of like a very pantheistic view of it, where like all of nature is interconnected, and he can see that connection and play with it. Almost a
Yeah,
bit like the Force, actually.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's like
Um,
Eastern mysticism is well known for its complete ripoffs of George Lucas. So
yes, yes.
definitely
It
not the
told,
other way around.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so so Van and the little girl, what was the girl's name? Yuna.
Yuna.
Yuna. Yeah, they escape the mine, and then they go off and on their own, and then we find out that of course then they come across a deer, and he can actually ride this deer.
Yes, and in this world, the people of Aquifa have what seems to be a lost talent for taming and riding these deer, which had a particular name, but I cannot remember what it is off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't remember. I want to say it started with an E.
Yeah, we'll just call them the deer going forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's basically like they are kind of reminiscent of reindeer, insofar as the males and females both have antlers, which does make sense for a riding deer. Although I don't think there is a deer in reality that you can reliably ride on. As my
Yeah.
memory serves, they're called reindeer because you use them to pull a sled.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Hence
See
Santa
Santa
Claus.
Claus.
Yeah.
So,
um,
so, so, uh, so at this point, you have a few threads going on. You've got a character who I can't believe he wasn't a villain, who is this doctor with the Zol Empire who's trying to uncover the real underlying cause of the wolf virus or the wolf fever.
yeah, because there's a lot of superstition going around that it's like a curse.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, Meanwhile, you've got so he's trying to track down our heroes. Meanwhile, you've got some machinations with. I believe that the one guy with the mustache is he's like a local prince who kind of collaborates with the Empire.
Yeah,
At least I think that's what he is.
that sounds about right. Yeah.
He's either that or a occupying general of some sort, but I wasn't entirely clear.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's trying to basically he's trying to take Van down because he thinks that this is going to be a threat to the Empire's power. You've got the Emperor who's showing up for a visit. You've got a a woman who is like a expert tracker who's working with them to try to bring them in, and she's a Aquafa as well. So yeah, it's like mixed loyalties.
Yeah.
I will say this is it's a pretty rich fantasy world. They've put a lot of effort into the different cultures there because like the Zol and the Aquafa definitely feel different.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
There's a lot of history from the war. Like a lot of the Aquafa men have Zol wives because they, as a part of the peace treaty, they intermarried.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, we see that with this village that Van and Yuna end up living in, and one of the things we find about Van is that he's actually from this tribe of people called what was it, the Lone Antlers. Is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Um, and
Like a lot of fantasy novels, there were a lot of nouns flying around. So
yeah, yeah. um, and so that's how he knows how to ride a deer. And of course, then you have the whole thing with him, the relationship with him and Yuna, where like it's very obvious that she's clung onto him and sees him as her father, even though he's not really her father.
right, and he is. I kept thinking how similar he was to what's his name from Gladiator.
Maximus.
Maximus. Okay, I wanted to say Maximus, but I also didn't want to sound stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, because he just went off to war and his wife and son died.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he was kind of snuffed out until he met Una. So she kind of saved his life too.
Yeah.
And so the crux of it is that at one point, Una gets kidnapped by a bunch of these black dogs. And so it's the quest to save Una.
Yes. Yeah. And and the black dogs have their own world that they live in, their own little kingdom that you find out about later on. And yeah.
Right. I believe it was like either the capital or a major city of the old Aquafa Kingdom that's been occupied by some stragglers, including a strange madman wizard who basically commands the dogs. And that was one of the things that struck me as kind of weird was that for a movie called The Deer King, it's kind of funny that weren't they calling him like the Wolf King or the Dog King? Like, isn't that what the Black Dog King, something like that?
Yeah, yeah, some like Wolf King, I think was what it was. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I thought that was kind of funny that he wasn't technically the Deer King. Like he was a deer rider, but that's like
yeah,
like they were trying to pressure him into taking command of the dogs and driving the the Zol out of the kingdom.
yeah.
Like this is very much like if I was to put this in European terms, this would be like it would be like set in Roman England or Roman Britain or Roman Britannia. There's the proper term for it. And
Yeah,
this is like a bunch of local Bretons trying to run them out
right. Yeah.
using the old ways of the Druids. Nobody knows about the Druids.
Stonehenge.
Okay, glad I'm not the only one who thought of that.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as like the actual pacing and plot go, this had I've noticed that a lot of Japanese fantasy anime adaptations do tend to have a pretty deliberate pacing to them.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name of it now, but there's some show about 10 years ago with this spear woman protecting the emperor's son that was just crawled.
Oh, yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah. Can't remember the name of it. Yeah.
So it's much more tolerable as a movie than as a TV show,
Yeah.
just because by the nature of a movie, things have to happen on some sort of timetable. Like, come on, come on. The landscape is pretty, but it ain't that pretty. Go.
Yeah.
Um, I think I enjoyed it much more than I didn't.
Yeah.
I would say that if you tried to watch the Lord of the Rings yeah, anime movie that came out last fall and couldn't get into it, this is basically what I think that movie was trying to be.
Uh, okay.
It's just because it's not beholden to being part of another franchise. It could, it could tell the story it wanted to tell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was, I mean, yeah, like you, I kind of enjoyed it more than, more than I didn't. I, although it was a little hard for me to kind of keep up with the, all the different factions and all the different people and everything.
I think I was about 45 minutes in before I really understood who was who at the zoo. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and mind you, this is a guy who played Final Fantasy 13 and I managed to figure out what they meant by fal'Cie and less'Cie relatively quickly. So it's
Yeah.
um, so like the cast is all good. Non-spoiler thoughts, I would say that if you don't mind a fairly slower paced anime movie, it does have a reasonably satisfying ending. It is well done. Like it's not as visually amazing as some of the Studio Ghibli movies that are in the same genre,
Yeah.
but I not even say that Lord of the Rings movie had a few more neat spectacle scenes than this one does.
Mm.
It's just that this movie is more coherent. And there, okay, so like, remember that scene in the mist,
Oh, with the
the
people in
stilt walkers?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like ultimately that scene could have been cut, but that's one of those things where if you're reading a fantasy novel, which is like a series of adventures as they get from point A to point B, I
yeah.
think that would have fit in better. But for like a movie with a limited runtime, it's like, oh, are there still people going to come back at some point? No,
No. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just a thing that flushes out the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was disappointed too when they didn't show up again. Like what was the point of them being in there? Yeah.
I like stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would give this one like a firm B minus from an enjoyment perspective. A lot of it's carried along by the relationship between Van and Yuna, which is adorable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it does have strong world building. Like you could tell a lot of effort went into this. Apparently, the novel series has been localized. Oh, apparently so
Okay.
is the manga series. I just haven't ever seen it for sale anywhere.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's actually very characterful. Like you do get a really good sense of who Van is, and Ewan is
Yeah.
a 5-year-old, so there's not really a lot of character to explore necessarily.
Yeah. She's adorable. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, right. It's actually kind of like to bring up another anime movie we reviewed. What was the name of that the imaginary friend one?
Uh, um, the Imaginary, is that it?
I think the imaginary is the name of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like the little girl in that one where we were like, how is she going to be the main character? She doesn't really have a whole lot to her. Oh, she isn't the main character.
Yeah. She
Oh,
spends the whole movie in a coma.
yeah, pretty much. Um, but yeah, so my only spoiler thought on this is that I kind of felt like they had a sort of naturalistic explanation for what was causing the wolf fever,
Yeah.
and I kind of, how to put it, it 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 was like it was still clearly magical, but the actual mechanism for why the one side was immune to it was almost more naturalistic.
Yeah.
And so it just felt kind of weird to me because what it turns out is that what makes you immune to the fever is drink is that the deer eat this particular type of clover which glows,
Yeah.
and then if you drink the milk of the deer, you are immune to the plague.
Yeah. So the doctor basically invented this world's version of penicillin.
I thought it was more of like a vaccine because it's
Okay,
like
well maybe a vaccine. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I guess it was more of a virus than a
yeah,
bacterial infection.
right. He was like he was watering down the blood of somebody else who was already infected. And I kind
Right.
of thought to myself, but the vaccine is unnecessary. Just start requiring everybody drink a certain amount of deer milk.
Yeah.
Uh,
Unless they've unless that would take too long.
I guess so. I guess once you're already infected, some deer yogurt or whatever probably wouldn't help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Now, but at the same time, it's like, okay, feels like an element from a book or a story that is trying to like debunk the supernatural nature of it. But then I remembered, oh, right, no, the wolves are extremely supernatural, so the plant must also be supernatural. Because like
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of Scooby Doo mechanics you have. These wolves were just surrounded by this black mist, liquidy mist.
Yeah.
And they were doing impossible things, but
Yeah.
it's like that ending kind of fit, but it also just was like mildly unsatisfying. And that could just be my Western bias of science versus magic, where like maybe in this universe it's more of like a unitary whole where it's like, oh, there's we can apply the scientific method and learn more about magic. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that again is just one thing that struck me as a little bit odd, but that's probably just I'm gonna chalk it up to just me being I'm gonna chalk it up as a personal thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess.
And
Oh, go ahead.
no. Finish what we're saying.
No, I was about to transition, so
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I will say the ending I thought was a little confusing because I wasn't entirely sure what happened to him, what happened to Van, that
yeah,
he like
anime
transcended or
movies
something. Yeah.
anime movies love Lady and the Tiger endings. I in fact, Your Name, the movie that this guy was involved in, was
Yeah.
had a similar sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. 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 But what do you have a good transition for us?
Yeah. Yes. That was kind of a personal failing I was having, but I guess I can just live and learn.
Yes. We're there we go. So my solo review for the week, which is convenient because DB doesn't have a solo review, but he has seen this movie and reviewed it for the show. So
Yep, I saw it during its initial theatrical run.
yeah, Sonic 3. I'll try not to get into too much of the plot since DB already did that. But just a kind of like a summation of it, we got our gang of heroes, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. They have to go to Japan when Gun shows up because there's a disturbance happening in Tokyo, and that disturbance is Shadow. Shadow.
The best character ever.
Yeah, voiced by Keanu. So Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, they have a hard time trying to fight him, and then Shadow gets away, and then they find out that Shadow was part of another gun program that was run by the grandfather of Ivo Robotnik. Did they give his name? I can't remember.
Gerald Robotnik.
Gerald Robotnik, yeah. And of course, and there at the time when in the 70s was also Gerald Robotnik's granddaughter Maria, and Maria and Shadow had this budding friendship, but then bad things happened, and Maria ended up dying, and so we had Robotnik, Granddad Robotnik, who was in prison for a long time, but then he escapes, and of course he's using all of Ivo Robotnik's tech, and so then Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails team up with Robotnik, and then of course then once Ivo sees that it's his grandfather, then he's like, they team up and to do bad stuff with Shadow, and of course you got Sonic and kind of dealing with his own little stuff, and which I think you mentioned this in your review that this movie kind of follows a lot of the same pattern as the first two movies, where Sonic is he and Tom, the Donut Lord, are kind of they have this bond very similar to Shadow and Maria, and of course and Sonic's life was very much different from Shadow's, because Sonic didn't have he didn't give into that darkness when he first got to Earth, and he didn't he was just kind of living on his own and wasn't a bad guy. But Shadow, he's got all this anger and hatred inside him. So they're basically like yin and yang. They have this like yin and yang thing going on. And
right, and like while Shadow is potentially softening up, Sonic is hardening because of what Shadow is doing. So
yeah,
it's all just very like interesting from like like the character work is pretty solid.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and even with Ivo Robotnik, where he's just like he thinks he finally has found his family with his grandfather, who's also played. Both of them are played by Jim Carrey, and they even have a little fourth wall breaking moment where they're like, "We're got two characters in the movie being played by the same actor."
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's I overall I enjoyed the movie. Although I would say I think the first movie is probably my favorite of the three, because this one felt a little too much of a retread of the second one.
Yeah, I think that in retrospect, the second one is kind of the weak link of the trilogy.
Yeah.
But this one did have it did have elements like the dueling Robotniks and some like really eye-catching action scenes.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
elevate it.
yeah. Like the whole sequence in the with the space station was really neat, and then and of course I guess Sonic and company are immune to the vacuum of space.
Don't think about it too hard.
Yeah, yeah.
They're from space, so
Yeah, yeah.
it all
Uh,
works out.
yes. um, and but yeah, I mean, it's a solid movie. It's this is probably this franchise is probably the best video game adaptation film franchise that's been made.
Yeah, like there are some TV shows that people might point to that compete with it, but
Yeah.
you specifically said movies, so
Yes. Yeah.
take that, people in the comments section.
Yes. Yes. I'm well aware Castlevania exists. um, but yeah, I mean, it's on Paramount Plus, and which along with the first two movies, I may go back and watch actually may just watch all three of these in a row.
Yeah, well, and of course you got to watch the Knuckles TV show because it fills in so many key details for this movie, right? Right.
Right? Yeah. uh, See, I was wrong in my prediction when we reviewed the Knuckles TV show. I thought like the only reference that they would make would be like Wade would have the bowling trophy and like he's polishing it or it'd be in the background. But no, they didn't even do that.
Yeah, he's just playing with it like it's a hockey puck on the roof.
Yeah, yeah, he's playing. Yeah, the Master Emerald.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's right.
he's
Yeah.
just hitting it with like a hockey puck.
Which, boy, that's one of those things where they must have been assuming that a lot more people would watch that show than they actually did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is the one black eye in this franchise, I would say. Yeah, that show was not very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, and when it comes to quality, our third movie compared to the rest is Untouchable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the Untouchables.
So, Daniel, you found us a video that basically went over the historical accuracy of this movie, and I think it would be fair to say that this movie is almost entirely made up, except for the fact that there were two men named Elliot Ness and Al Capone, who in Chicago at some point in the 30s who did not care for each other.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is not the most historically accurate movie. Although I will say, for anybody out there, if that bothers you, you can view this movie more as an adaptation of the old television show than being an historical movie.
Right, since they were both based on the highly questionable life story given by uh, Elliot Ness
Yes.
when he was a washed-up drunk whose wife had left him.
Yeah.
An ironic end for the guy who helped bring down the biggest rum runner of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Untouchables. This movie takes place in 1930, at the height of Prohibition, which was, our native country, the United States, has made a lot of has done a lot of great things throughout its history. It's also made a lot of mistakes. Prohibition, I would say, is right up there in terms of one of the biggest mistakes. Which, for those of you who don't know, it prohibited the sale and consumption of alcohol.
Not the consumption necessarily. You just
Not just the
like
sale. Yeah.
here's the thing. There were apparently some like private clubs in like for rich people that had existing alcohol stockpiles that were allowed. I think they were like allowed to provide alcohol as part of their membership benefits, but they couldn't like sell it directly. So they're kind of
Okay.
working off of their pre-prohibition reserves.
Uh,
Yeah, it's like there were ways around it, and there's like
yeah.
there's certain types of there was some type of alcohol that was produced in Chicago. Let's see, what was it called? Let's see here.
Well, a lot of people made their own alcohol.
Oh, sure, but
Yeah, like my great grandfather did that.
I'm there's like this particular type. It's like mole something, M something. Basically, it
Yeah.
was designed for this guy who had killed his taste buds drinking or smoking and eating too many cigars.
Oh, eating? Oh.
And he had a custom alcohol made for him that he could actually taste. I was told that this stuff was not actually controlled during Prohibition because, like, if you're getting drunk on this stuff, then
Yeah.
thank God bless you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and the movie starts off. I will say that this thing is who's the director of this one again?
It was Brian De Palma.
Yeah, De Palma was definitely doing some experimental and clever things with the directing in this movie. So
Yeah.
like the opening shot is a front, like a top-down perspective of Al Capone, just having his just being barbered.
Yeah.
And what it really emphasized, well, first off, it was a very long shot just to give you time to read the it's 1930 prohibition has been in effect da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But it also just gave you a sense of like he was off to the left hand side of it and like, there were so many people all around him. It just gave you a sense of how important this mobster was.
Yeah. Yeah. And the I kind of want to point out real quick. Capone's played by Robert De Niro, and when they started filming the movie, De Niro actually tracked down Al Capone's tailor, and he had his tailor make all of the same suits and clothes that Capone wore, right down to his underwear. So, good for those of you who don't, De Niro is a real method actor, so he really needs to get into the part. Yeah, um, yeah, and yeah, you get as DB said, you get a sense of how important he is, and there's even a point in there where the guy's giving him a shave, and he accidentally cuts him, and he kind of looks at him like you could tell he wanted to bust him up, but he just kind of wipes the blood on the guy's shirt.
Right, because he there are the news media is around interviewing him, so he has to keep up appearances, which is that is like a just nice summation of the character. He's like a savage who tries to have good publicity.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
which is accurate. Capone did like operate soup kitchens and stuff with his ill-gotten gains.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and then we cut to what I'll call like a maybe like a I think it was a pharmacy, where
Yeah,
yeah, where this one of Capone's guys is trying to shake down the owner, and the owner's like not having it, and then
right. I'm not going to buy your bad beer.
yeah, uh, and then this little girl that was they're getting looked like she was getting like milk or something for the family, and then one of the guys left their briefcase behind, and kaboom.
Yeah, and she gets taken out.
Yeah,
This incident did not actually happen, but
no,
boy, um, if you're trying as a this movie is very good at manipulating you. Is the way I'll
yeah, it
put it.
is. Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Um,
And it also has a very it has a very mob movie type of morality to it, in the sense that a lot of mob movies are very much about like that. Like, there's no necessarily white or black. This is almost more presented as like the law is on Ness's side, but he keeps having to break more and more of his own internal compass to be effective.
right, yeah, yeah, and Ness is played by Kevin Costner, and he yeah he he kind of has to break all of that stuff because number one, like he can't trust anybody on the police force because most of them are all on Capone's payroll.
Yeah, the corruption runs deep.
Yeah, and so he wants to work inside the law, but he realizes he has to kind of work outside of the law. And after a failed raid, he meets Sean Connery's character, Jim Malone. And by the Connery, by the way, won an Oscar for this movie.
Well deserved.
Yeah. And Ness kind of recognizes that Malone is he's an honest cop because they kind of have this little back and forth on the bridge where where Malone looks at Ness and says, well, why would you claim to be something that you're not? They were kind of having this. It was kind of like an honesty kind of lesson, if you will. And also too, I'll be generous. I'll guess Malone's probably in his probably mid-50s, and he's still a beat cop.
Yeah, he's as he put it when Ness was trying to recruit him. I wish I'd met you when I was 10 years and 20 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
Or 10 years and 20 pounds ago.
Yeah. But he still ends up going to work for Ness, and then you also have this other FBI agent that joins him, Oscar Wallace, who's played by Charles Martin Smith, who we saw in American Graffiti. He's the kind of nerdy guy who's trying to buy booze and pick up that one hot blonde.
I guess he figured himself out via time travel.
Yes,
trying to make up for past mistakes.
Yeah,
fighting booze instead of contributing to degeneracy.
Yeah. Yes.
And then they have a cool thing that apparently did sort of happen, which was they recruited straight from the police academy because, like, hey, if they're still in the academy, they're not going to be corrupt.
Right. Yeah.
And they get Stone, who's like their best gunman.
Yeah, and he's played by Andy Garcia, which is kind of funny because you got a Cuban actor who's playing an Italian character.
Yeah, it's all basically the same, right?
Well, yeah.
At least according to Hollywood. Look. If you could have a French guy play a Scotsman in Highlander, while our Scotsman played a Egyptian named Ramirez. 80s Hollywood was wild, man. And speaking of trends at the time, this movie is definitely in the same sort of it's like an outgrowth of the same sort of tough on crime, but like you have to be outside the law thought process that brought us movies like Death Wish, comic book characters like the Punisher. It's definitely about like how far do you go to punish the guilty?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and of course they're branded the Untouchables because they had an alderman shows up trying to bribe Ness, and Ness just kicks him out of there.
Yeah, we'll have none of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the movie has a lot of kind of the great. It's got a lot of the great one-liners or quotable lines. Like you put one of they put one of yours in the hospital. You put one of theirs in the morgue. That's the Chicago way.
If they bring a knife, you bring a gun.
Yeah. And it's it's very much I mean, if you take away from the historical part of it and you look at it from the lens of a crime drama, it's very well done.
Yes, the action escalates. There's a nice progression as Capone becomes more and more aware of these guys and becomes more desperate to take them down as they are getting close to him.
Yeah, and
because just like in real life, they couldn't ever prove that Capone They could never prove that Capone's money was coming from illegal sources. They could never prove that he actually ordered any of the killings he ordered, but they could prove that he had failed to put, file his taxes for his ill-gotten gains.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the crux of the movie is once they figure out that like, oh, he hasn't been paying taxes, that's when they go and find his bookkeeper and find the ledger, which of course is in this other decipherable like code or whatever. But they're like, oh yeah, but they convinced the bookkeeper to cooperate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this movie's in a weird place where it's almost as old as we are.
Mhm.
So it's hard to, but it's also like that, which means it's old enough that a lot of people probably haven't seen it necessarily. So just because of the quality of it, I'm going to put our spoiler firewall right here.
Yeah.
Um, so, or I should say, not maybe not right here. Let's talk a little bit about some more non-spoiler thoughts. Performance-wise, I'm just going to say it. I'm not the biggest Kevin Costner fan. I think this is the third thing we've reviewed with him in it in a prominent way.
Yes. Yeah.
The other ones being his his self-indulgent Horizon movie that his character was actually kind of a bit player in ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the second one being Waterworld, which neither of us cared for.
Yeah, it was thoroughly okay. Fell apart in the execution.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just for some reason, the way he delivers his lines just doesn't do it for me. I actually kind of kept thinking that I'd almost rather have Tom Hanks as the sort of golly gee gosh police officer early on. And then towards the end of the movie, as he started doing more hard bit, and I was saying, okay, now seems more like the character.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the beginning he's very much a Boy Scout. And then and yeah, by the end of the movie he's a hardened lawman.
Yeah, and I think that maybe part of the mismatch was that he did a better job playing the hardened lawman than playing the Boy Scout. Because playing the Boy Scout, it felt like he was too earnest, too trustworthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't really fit him, but I got used to him by the end.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Sean Connery, boy, late '80s, early '90s Sean Connery in a movie with anybody in an action role is unfair because he just acts circles around whatever younger actor he's paired with.
Yeah. Yeah, whether it's Kevin Costner here or Alec Baldwin in Red October, which we reviewed a couple weeks ago. Yeah. That's very true.
His character is amazing. There's an extended sequence where you're seeing it from somebody else's perspective, and by this time you love the character so much that you're just really worried for him. And I go, come on, turn around, turn around.
Yeah.
He's following you. Turn around.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
far as like I mentioned before, that this is very well directed. There's a bunch of like fun little references. The big one I caught was again, this movie is made up, and apparently they repurposed this scene in a train station where Ness has to save a child in a baby carriage uh,
Yeah.
from a different movie he was shooting that they just didn't have time for. Uh, and
Yeah.
so it was a reference to the old Soviet movie, The Battleship Potemkin.
Yeah.
So like if you see a movie with like a tall staircase with a baby carriage like falling or going down the stairs, that's what that's referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, De Palma has a very unique style to him. That one shot where it's kind of like this weird perspective where the character is like really close to the camera, and then the person's kind of a little further away.
Hmm.
He does that he does that trick in like every single one of his movies. He did
So,
that in
so I was gonna say, if you're a Philistine like me, what else has he done?
uh, well, let's see. He did well before this movie. He directed Carrie.
Okay.
He did Dress to Kill, Scarface, uh,
Okay.
and then after this, he directed the very first Mission Impossible.
Okay.
Yeah. He's in that same auteur filmmaker club with like Spielberg and Lucas and Scorsese, Coppola. Yeah.
Gotcha. So part of that 70s revolution in Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, like this movie was just very interesting to watch. Because
Yeah.
not like a lot of scenes were not very predictable, which is like I should say the way scenes were shot was not always predictable, and the action definitely hit home. You worried for characters even if you knew historically that they survived out of the 30s.
Yeah. 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 But yeah, this is. I mean, I think the one negative we both have is the film's score.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there were some 80s isms that just did not match. Uh,
Yeah.
the closest I can think of to something more contemporary would be like how 10 years ago they would have tried to mix dubstep in with everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Where it's like a more period appropriate soundtrack would have probably been better.
Yeah. Yeah. They were definitely trying to go like experimental with that film score, and it just certain scenes the music didn't match the the scene. Like like the raid up in at the Canadian border. They were playing the orchestral score, which didn't really fit with that scene. It fit more with like the opening credits.
Yeah. Let's hear
Yeah.
who did this music for this. So I looked them up.
It's
It was
Italian, wasn't he?
yeah, Ennio Morricone, who
Yeah.
is known for well, he did. Of course, he's known for the Untouchables. Come on,
Yeah.
IMDb, be helpful.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
he did a bunch of yeah. That's so. What's funny about him is that he died many years ago, but his music is still so. Actually, I guess 2020. His music is still sampled all over the place, so his IMDb is a bit of a mess because people borrow stuff from his old Western movies and places.
Okay.
Uh, I want to say he did the Fistful of Dollars movies, but I'm not sure. Could be mistaken.
Probably.
Let's see
Uh,
here.
the other thing too,
He did Two Girls, One Cup the show. Wait, there was a Two Girls, One Cup the show?
what? Oh, I didn't need to hear that. I didn't want to know that.
Okay, yeah, he did do The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. So I guess his career
Okay.
balances out.
Yeah.
Actually, what I almost guarantee is that he did do Navajo Joe because I kept hearing like similarities to this soundtrack from that one.
Ah, yeah.
I couldn't find him before, but yeah, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I definitely could hear that carry through, but yeah, he kind of got too experimental and out there for his own good in this one.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention real quick is the writing was really well done. The writer on the movie is David Mamet, who did Glengarry Glen Ross.
Okay, you know what? I can see that, or I should say, I can hear that now that you mention that, because it
Yeah,
is a very sort of snappy, rough dialogue.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is. I think both of us enjoy this movie very much. I had seen it a few times before, but I actually I hadn't watched it in about 10 or 15 years. So this was a nice pick. Yeah,
Yeah, this was my first time with it,
yeah,
and I quite enjoyed myself. You know, every time I watch one of these mobster movies, I learn new and interesting slurs for Italians. So there you go.
yeah. Ooh,
Whereas growing up in the part of the country I lived in, I didn't even know there were slurs for Italians.
yeah.
All right.
Uh,
So I did say like we're gonna firewall some spoiler thoughts. But yeah, okay. You know what? I didn't get very much sleep last night, so I might have overthought it. I'm gonna
yeah,
say that there really aren't any. There isn't. I don't feel the need to go into the plot in enough detail to spoil it. It's just like
yeah,
we've basically explained the progression of the movie. Again, like it's a historical movie. I usually say be true to the history, but in this case, I'll allow it just because it's good.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, yes. Although I will say one kind of spoilery-ish one I will give, given that it's not very historically accurate, and just a warning for people. There is one character in the movie who meets his end, not in a way that he did in real life. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. This movie and the Untouchables TV show itself might have overemphasized Elliot Ness's importance and downplayed another character.
Yes, yeah.
Which what was the name of the channel you recommended or that you found the video from?
Joe Blow.
I would say watch this first, then watch Joe Blow and realize just how much fun they had with the history in this one.
Yeah.
Um, Daniel, from your opinion, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is a dry history documentary with exquisite sourcing, and 10 is Gladiator having them restore the Roman Republic, where would you put this one's realism?
Probably about 9, 9.5.
Yeah. Okay. So it's almost up there with ahistorically restoring the Roman Republic from the Empire.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So don't. So if you're the type to get bent out of shape about that, I don't know, man. Go watch Pain and Gain. That was actually pretty true to the history.
Yes, it was. Yeah, yeah. Or as I said before, just think of it as an adaptation of the TV show.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we've said all we need to say.
Don't need to touch that anymore.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the bell. And also, Guardian Angel Part 2 is on Indiegogo. So, link is in the description down below. Buy some comic books. And we'll see you next week. Should I mention something that you've got going on next week, DB? Or
and we'll mention it next week.
okay. All right. We'll see you next week. Night, everybody.
Night, everyone.